Welcome to the City Club of Eugene's March 5th, 2021 program, Strides for Social Justice. This is the 23rd program of our 2020-2021 programming year. My name is Scott Coltrane, and I'm the City Club President. Support for the City Club is provided by our members and sponsors. You can become a member of the City Club at our website, cityclubofueugene.org. Our programs are always available on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page, and are broadcast on public radio station KLCC 89.7 on Mondays at 7 p.m. We have both business and in-kind sponsors, including our diamond sponsors, Kaiser Permanente, University of Oregon, Peace Health, and Lane Community College, as well as generous support received from the City of Eugene and from Lane County. In today's programs, we welcome presenters Delisa Meshintuby, Eric Richardson, and Becky Radliff. Delisa Meshintuby has been the Executive Director of Volunteers in Medicine for almost 20 years. She chairs the Peace Health Sacred Heart Medical Center Community Health Board and is pastor of St. Mark's AME Church. Eric Richardson is Executive Director of the Eugene Springfield chapter of the NAACP, where for years he's provided leadership in developing strong cultural presence and spearheading the NAACP engagement with the historic MIMS property. Becky Radliff is the Director of Event Operations at the Eugene Marathon. Prior to joining the Marathon staff, she spent 7 years with Tracktown USA, where she worked on the 2012 and 2016 U.S. Olympic trials and several other significant championship track meets. Biographical information on our speakers is available on our website, cityclubofueugene.org. I would like to thank Ann Williams and Mary Layton for coordinating today's program. Strides for Social Justice. Peace Health and the Eugene Marathon are collaborating on a new initiative that highlights the contributions, milestones, and achievements of local Black residents, as well as the injustices they have faced. Through a free, downloadable app, Strides for Social Justice guides participants on routes to various landmarks, creating a journey that provides a view into local Black history and the powerful influence of Black residents. Stops along the routes include the Masonic Cemetery, a monument for Wiley Griffin, a trolley operator and one of Eugene's best-known early Black residents. Westmoreland Park, where there is a mural for the late Dr. Edwin Coleman Jr., longtime University of Oregon English professor, community leader, and activist. And the historic Mims House, purchased by C.B. and Annie Mims in 1948 and serving as a safe haven for African American travelers for the next 20 years of racial separation in Eugene, which is now the home of the Eugene Springfield chapter of the NAACP. A steering committee of 16 community members with varied background advised on the development of this program. All three of today's panelists were members of the Strides for Social Justice Steering Committee. Our format today includes a question and answer period with City Club members via Zoom. Delisa, we'll begin with you.
Hello, I'm Delisa Meshintuby. I'm the Executive Director of Volunteers in Medicine Clinic, and I'm also Chairwoman of Peace Health's Community Health Board. And for the last 4 years, I've been affiliated with the Community Health Board. And some people probably ask the question why a healthcare organization is leading a racial justice initiative like Strides for Social Justice. And for me, that's an easy answer. The answer should be pretty clear. I call racism a public health crisis. Not only me, but many across the nation calls it a public health crisis. The impact of racism is deep it's harmful, and it's unfairly disadvantageous to Blacks, Indigenous, and people of color. We call that BIPOC. Racism is a root cause of poverty and economic inequality. It is ingrained in institutional policies and practices, and it creates differential access to opportunities and resources. Just going along with that, you'll see now that the impact of the COVID-19, the vaccine, has on the BIPOC community. These communities are also disproportionately affected by chronic conditions such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and maternal and infant mortality. Now, social justice is one of Peace Health's deeply held values, and it's also a legacy of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. Sister Monica Heron, the former CEO of Peace Health, founded the organization I now lead in 1999. Volunteers in Medicine continues to serve low-income and otherwise marginalized Lane County residents. Sister Monica, she believed that healthcare is a fundamental human right, and that everyone should have access to high-quality care. So do I. I believe that as well. And as a 130-year-old Catholic health system, Peace Health continuously challenges itself to answer the call for social and health justice, embracing, celebrating, and advancing the diversity of its communities, caregivers, and the individuals it is privileged to serve. Social and health justice are for all. They are the very essence of the Peace Health mission, and calling to treat every person in a loving and caring way. Peace Health defines health justice as the open expression of human dignity to everyone. They treat people with honor, respect for who they are and where they come from. It means access to equitable and affordable quality care for all. Social justice is the view that everyone deserves equal rights and opportunities. This value calls on Peace Health to pursue health justice for all by building and evaluating the structures of the organization and those of society to promote the just distribution of healthcare resources. Now, as you know, a few months ago, the senseless death of George Floyd and other Black Americans called on all of us to look inward. It called on us to examine our moral compasses and our social constructs. Now, as Lane County's largest healthcare provider and employer, Peace Health has the opportunity and the obligation to do more. Peace Health can leverage expertise in event planning and health and wellness and physical fitness and community connections. While serving on the steering committee was truly a dynamic experience, it allowed each member of the committee to bring a unique perspective and offered valued input to ensure the program checked all the boxes. For instance, it was important that the overall program provided an honest reflection of the Black experience in our community. The routes were safe and accessible. The activities included not only a dynamic way to interact with history, but for creating space for moments of reflection while promoting health and wellness. There were additional resources if participants were moved and inspired to do more. So I'm going to quote Nelson Mandela. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. That powerful statement underscores the why behind Strides for Justice and what inspired me to be actively involved. We hope the members of our community will take a moment to download the app, open their hearts, open their minds, and join us on this journey. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Eric Richardson.
Thank you very much, Delisa. It's an honor to be here with you all today at the City Club. And I appreciate the work the City Club getting pertinent information out, having good conversations. And so today we're here to talk about the Strides for Justice app and the NAACP's relationship in the committee. As you just heard from Pastor Delisa, that this is a very pertinent and important effort that Peace Health and the Eugene Marathon has really embarked on. And we have to acknowledge that this is in a direct response to the killing of George Floyd and the protests that followed. It was really a year of reckoning for our nation in many ways. And I think that we here in Oregon have an opportunity to come up with solutions of creating bridges of dialogue and creating neighbors, once again, of our citizenships and our residents in the United States of America. And I think that the Strides for Justice app goes a long way towards doing that, because really we're talking about looking at access to different historical perspectives so that we can become closer to one another with our understanding of our lived experiences, so that we could help each other get that place to that place that we call the beloved community. At the NAACP, we have been working on the idea of racial justice for over 112 years. And we believe that the idea of racial justice is sewn into the garment of this nation. And that those peoples who were the weavers sometimes did that free of charge and at the point of a whip to weave a garment that in their heart was a garment of love. And so as we go forward, we have two things to consider: a harsh history that we cannot escape, and a promising future that together we can build. And I think that this app really is a way of bridging both of those two efforts, because there's going to be a chance for you to reflect on the racial history that these spaces represent. And there's also going to be a chance for you to physically think about how you can better yourself in the moment, and how we can get our mind and our bodies in tune physically and spiritually, and with someone outside of ourselves. Now, as an African American, I am born into a culture that is outside of myself, and I have to learn and appreciate all the wonderful things that are out there. And now we're asking that everyone else appreciate the wonderful things that are in our homes and in our lived experiences, African peoples in the Americas. And so this app also does call into the question, because of Peace Help's involvement with it, this issue of racism as a public health crisis. How do we get to the end of this problem that has caused so much trauma in our nation, and so much, it has cost us much national treasure when it comes to the lives lost, productivity lost, home values lost. We talk about the destruction in Tulsa, Black Wall Street. What did that cost our nation and our peoples? So as we go forward, we need to learn these lessons and be diligent. And I think that, and so I just want to thank everybody for supporting the deployment of the Strides for Justice app. As we go forward, I want to be a partner and working to bring people together and raising awareness about where we've been and where we can go together. And I think that the app is going to show many great stories of inspiration, as well as stories of hardship. But I think as we go forward, we should all be inspired that we are taking the efforts to build the kind of community that we are proud to pass along to our youth and our children. And that is one where we respect everybody's history, we are knowledgeable about each other's history, and we respect each other as human beings, person to person. And so I'm sure there'll be more to talk about with the question session. I look forward to riding the routes with my family as the weather gets better. And I'm really proud to say that after many years of an oral tradition in Lane County, in the Black community, about the history of our experience in Lane County, we're starting to see the solidification and the validation of our presence in Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County. And I just want to thank Peace Health for putting this forward, and Eugene Marathon for the vision. With that, I'd like to go ahead and give it over to Becky.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Delisa. First off, just want to say what a pleasure it has been to work with Eric and Delisa and the whole steering committee on this project. I feel like a good opening is to say, why Eugene Marathon? Why would the Eugene Marathon be interested in a project like Strides for Social Justice? And I think you have to go back to where we were in 2020. And that was, we had to cancel our marathon. And right afterwards, we sat down with Peace Health, who is our exclusive healthcare sponsor for the marathon. And we were like, what can we do in lieu of the marathon? What project, what program could we add to the community that would take that place? What can we work on together? And it was right around the time of all of the awakening around racial injustice in our country. And we looked at each other on a Zoom call, just kind of like this. And we said, let's do something like that. And that's how it started. And then we conceptualized some idea that was around learning about history, doing some kind of physical movement, and then reflecting on the history that you learned. And we said, we think we have an idea here. Let's get a steering committee together and see where it could go. So we pitched this idea to many leaders in the community, like Eric and Delisa, and they didn't think we were crazy. they wanted to be a part of it. And so we started working on it together. We started meeting pretty much weekly for the last 6 months, really since August, and set the stage for this program. And really what we came to was we want this program to hit on 3 pillars: history, health, and heart. And with the idea of, okay, we have this history, so let's curate this history in an app and present that history that already exists, but to hopefully a new audience. And then let's make people walk or run or ride in between these landmarks in order to get a little physical exercise. And then one of our steering committee members, Dr. Yvette Alex Asensio from the University of Oregon, said, we can't stop there. We have to encourage movements of the heart. We have to make people reflect on this. And it just, I think all of us in that meeting were like, well, yeah, of course. Like, that is what we have to do. We want this to be a holistic experience. And that's really a big goal of the project, is to hit on those 3 pillars and to start kind of this road, not necessarily to be the end of the history or even an expert in history, but to scratch the surface of the history in this way, to get people interested, and then to really provide the ability to have them activate in the community. So the goal would be, you do the route, and we have 4 routes that we've launched with. We have our downtown route, Westmoreland Park route, West Eugene route, and the South Eugene route, with more coming. And those would be centered around the U of O and other spots around the downtown and the Skinner's Butte area. And the thought was that they do the route, but it's only a launching point. So one of the big goals is to raise funds for education and scholarships. So a big one is the NAACP's Maddie Reynolds Scholarship, and then the Oregon Black Education Fund. And then an additional way to kind of have people take next steps after they've completed the route is to have them look further into like specific pieces of history that may be found in other resources. One of our steering committee members, Mark Harris, and his wife, Sherry Turpin, have this wonderful site and this program that they've had for years in the community called I2M Eugene. And they were a huge resource for us from a historical perspective. And so we have a link to them there. I spoke about Dr. Asensio at the U of O. She has a program called LACE, which is introduced within the app, and then people can explore that further. So yeah, the idea is for it to be a family-friendly, inclusive, interactive experience that encourages history, health, heart, and then activates people to take the next step. So.
Hi, I'm Mary Layton, the coordinator of this program, and our first question is from Joel Corin. Joel?
Thank you for being here and for your presentation. I would like if you would describe some of the points of interest that people will see on the routes, and also describe how we would go about getting the app on our phones.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll take the first part of that question. The points of interest really encompass our whole city, and really, and our history going back from 1910 all the way up to modern times at the Westmoreland Community Center, where the mural of Dr. Coleman was put up only in 2019. So this history spans this great 100 years or more of African American presence here. And so you're talking about the Masonic Cemetery up on 26th and University, South Eugene, Wiley Griffin's grave. And then we have the Mims House itself, which is the first Black-owned property in the city limits. We're talking about 1948, so that's another 50 years. And then you go up to one of the great stories, unheard of stories, is Eugene's own gold medal Olympic track athlete, and that's associated with the Jefferson Junior High, or ATA, track over there. So there's going to be a lot of actual local history that you'll be able to visit and be illuminated about. So I think it's really exciting to see some of those unsung heroes that have been here amongst us the whole time. And so those are just three of those particular spaces you'll be able to see. But as far as the app, I'll give it over to Becky.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So like Eric said, we have a number of different landmarks that are part of different routes, and the routes are broken up geographically. So the downtown route starts in what is currently our Alton Baker Park, but the landmark there is to acknowledge the Ferry Street community, which was a community that was primarily Black residents in Eugene who were not allowed to live in the city limits, and so they lived across the bridge. And in 1949, the Ferry Street Bridge was going to be expanded, and so the county bulldozed the community after providing notice to the residents there. So that's where the downtown route starts. It then goes across the river, past the Wiley Griffin placard at the eWeb building, then over to the Mims house to say hi to Eric and the NAACP and acknowledge the Mims family. Then down past Free Speech Plaza, Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza, over to the Rosa Parks Plaza at the LTD downtown station, up to the Eugene train depot to acknowledge that the train and railroad industry was the highest employer of Black residents in the early part of the 1900s. and then back to the start. So it ends up being about a 3-mile walking or running route around downtown. And the app actually takes you from each one of those. There's a little bit of history on each one, and then there's a reflection at the end. And then the additional routes are West Eugene, which is centered around Delisa's church, St. Mark's, and the Sam and Maddie Reynolds family. So there's Sam Reynolds bus station out there, there's Sam Reynolds Street, and then there's the new park that is going to be established, Maddie Reynolds Park. So that's the West Eugene route. And then Westmoreland Park, like Eric said, is all about both Dr. Edwin Coleman, late Dr. Edwin Coleman, and the Boys and Girls Club there, which that building was named in his honor. And then a mural was put up just this past, I think in the past year, 19 or 20. So that building is awesome. You walk around the park, do some exercises, and then go to the Margaret Johnson Bales track there by ATA. And if you are willing, do a little track workout. And then the last one that we've launched with is the South Eugene route, which is to honor Wiley Griffin. There's a mural on Willamette Street. They're right next to the new Civic Stadium, and then walk from there over to his monument in the Masonic Cemetery. So that's just a really quick summary of all of the routes that we've launched with. The plan for the future of it is to add more routes. So there'll be specifically at least one, if not 2 routes dedicated to the University of Oregon and the Black history around the University of Oregon. And that one is going to launch closer to graduation time and when the Olympic trials is going to be in town here. So, so definitely stay tuned for that. And Joel, to answer the second part of your question, the app can be downloaded on the iOS store. So for your iPhone on your app store, or on your Android app if you go to the Google Play Store. So it's there. And if you need any more information about it as well, we're also on a website, stridesforsocialjustice.org.
Sandra, you have a question. Sandra Bishop.
Thank you, Sandra Bishop, City Club member. My question has to do with the expectation or the goal. I understand this is a wonderful kind of opportunity that's being taken advantage of, but what's the expectation of this project? What's the goal? And is there any way to measure the success of this kind of a project? On the one hand, I'm excited about it, but I also feel it has a certain element of preaching to the choir. Delisa will probably hate that expression. But I just wonder, are we really making inroads into more education, which leads to more racial justice? That's the real question. Is there any way to measure the effectiveness of this? Thank you.
Well, yeah. Delisa.
No, go ahead, Eric. Well, I'll say this. For me, I'm not an Oregonian. I was born in Fort Smith, Arkansas. I moved here years ago, but a lot of the history that I've seen from this app has educated me, as well as it's going to educate my grandchildren. And in order to get to the future, we have to know our past. So I really think that's one thing that the app is going to do, because I happened to go to the Dr. Coleman mural with Becky and Ann, and I had such a wonderful experience there, because, what you see is not all one-dimensional. And I got to envelop the essence of who this man truly was. And I think, how do you measure that? We, as I said in my speech, the moral compass, it's where we have to look down within ourselves now and to understand what it is that we're seeking, what it is we want to know, and how do we get there. And I love that expression, preaching to the choir, because my kids used to hear that growing up all the time. Thank you, Sandra. Eric?
hmm No, I agree. And I think there's something to this idea of preaching to the choir, because one of the things that my youth and people of color have been missing, positive images of themselves in our society. And so this goes a long way just for the choir to see that they are respected and that their story means something. And so I think this is good for the little kids to see themselves, and for young families to see themselves and be active in our community. And so it's not only for the greater community. So a lot of times people will say, well, this is for, the general white population, learn about Black folks, and yeah, we feel good about it. No, hey, that's cool for that, but it's also, we need to see ourselves in our history and in our community. So it's a benefit to us, but it's also a benefit to the greater community as well. So that's why I want to thank them for doing this, because history, when you see yourself in history, then you have a greater propensity to try to continue that trend and be part of the ongoing work that is our day-to-day life, civic engagement, whatnot. And so I think there's a great opportunity for that to sink into people, to see that, hey, we're in this together. And so I think there's that quality that is beneficial.
Joel, you have another question?
Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
Sandra, I was just going to add, specifically regarding metrics, I think one of our big goals, I mean, obviously we want a lot of people to engage with and download the app and engage with the history and learn about Black history in Eugene. But I think another part of it is a deeper level of engagement, because it's not just about like reading about Wiley Griffin. It's about trying to imagine what life would be like as a Black man living in Eugene in 1900. It takes those who experience the app and do everything that it guides you through. We hope that the success is measured in the experience that they have, and hopefully it's something that's inspiring and reflective and moves them to do greater things in the community.
And another thing, I think every one of these stories are not just a story of a Black person. They're the story of the relationship between Black people and white society. Wiley Griffin, the story, when you go there, you understand that he was buried there at the very beginning of an exclusive Masonic cemetery. And he was buried there. There's a story of a relationship there. Same with the Mims. There's a story of the relationship with Joe Early and the Mims family. Same with Margaret Johnson. There's a story between how did she get to the Olympics and the Johnson family in Eugene, Oregon, where she couldn't afford the right type of shoes. So there's these stories of relationships that we can, bring out and bring to the bear as we go forward.
Maybe the term allies applies. I was thinking of the guy Early, because Jack and I, my grandson and I, talked about him. I said, that guy took a risk.
Well, you talk in our, I don't want to get off the point, but there are those who took risk in our community, and who, if you want to talk about allies, and you talk about Wayne Morse, who was in the 40s and 50s, a big leader in the NAACP at the national level, whilst living in Eugene, Oregon. So this is a story. This is an app that really brings relationships back as well.
So Joel, I'm sorry, you got the question.
My question relates to the statement that was made that racism is a public health issue. Who in Oregon is doing research on racism as a public health issue?
Well, I can tell you that many times this effort was taken up by educators, less about, less from the medical field. We need buy-in from the medical field and more research around that. I think I've asked about the numbers around research. I've also asked, for instance, there's research that's done about disability, like cognitive disabilities. And we asked, has there been any research in your lab about racism and what that does to your cognitive function, and how do you, and what this type of thing. So there's little research, but in court cases and in educational fields, the issue is being brought up. And so we are pushing this idea that the medical field should look at this as we get more diverse, demographic changes coming. We want to be able to nip it in the bud if it is something that we can address from a mental health issue. And that's when we talk about health, we talk about mostly mental health and racism. So I couldn't really tell you, maybe somebody else has a direct answer to that.
Delisa,
You know what I was going to say, I've been here at Volunteers in Medicine it's in some form or fashion for 20 years. This is our 20-year anniversary. Healthcare system is playing a big part in this now because people need quality health care. And as I said before, to me, healthcare is a right. And I see what Peace Health is doing to help take care of the community. And here at Volunteers in Medicine, we try to take care of those who fall between 85% to 300% of the federal poverty level. Almost 30% or so of our clientele are Spanish speakers. I would say there's culture in how we eat, there's culture in how we live, how we work, and then things like this is what's showing us, the data is what's showing us how do we take care of our community. You can't take one diagnosis just as like diabetes and say that just because she has diabetes and she's Caucasian, I have diabetes, I'm African American, that you can take care of it the same way. Because she might be eating worse than I am or better than I am, and she might get out and do exercise where I don't. So to me, that's where we need to take a look at all of the advantages. And I say advantages because what we're doing is trying to take care of the community, but we can't take care of the symptom. We have to take care of the person and their diagnosis. So that's where I see the medical field stepping into this, because everyone's starting to notice what's wrong with this picture.
Yeah, and I just had one also, give a name out there. Dr. Joy DeGruy is someone to look up, and she has written a book called The Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And she talked about how that the mental health aspects of a post-traumatic slave syndrome. And there's a chapter that it talks about the effects of that it has on African people, post-traumatic slave syndrome, but it also talks about the effects of post-traumatic slave syndrome on white people, with the whole idea of desensitizing against the treatment of other fellow human beings according to race is unnatural. And it had to, but it occurred to children. And so you have the generational trauma in white communities around how we socialize our children to normalize racism. And then you have the effects of racism on people of color. So this whole idea is something that we should look at as Americans because it affects us deeply.
Sandra?
I had another question. This is Sandra Bishop, City Club member. I had another question. Well, I have two questions, so I'll do one at a time. Has there been any thought to expanding this app to include other cultural backgrounds people? I grew up with the tribes and grew up in Oregon, and so I know that there are different cultural ways of being. My Hispanic friends don't tend to promote themselves as much as Eric does. There's just a different dynamic in the different cultures. And so I'm just wondering, this is such an incredible thing that you've put together. I'm just wondering if it could be used later on for other cultures, for us to really get a better understanding of some of the other cultures that we're interacting with on a regular basis.
I just want to.
She just said 30% of the clients at Volunteers Medicine are Spanish speaking, so that
Yeah.
my point. Thanks.
But I want to. I'll go really quickly. There's going to be plenty of room for that. And there's a reason why I speak so much about it, because we've had 67 years of underdevelopment and under access. and Latinx peoples have strong cultural affinities still. There's nations that we can walk to. Black people in America don't have that. We have to acknowledge that you cannot just say you did it for you, so now everybody gets the same thing. There is a difference, and we have to acknowledge that. And there are strong, viable Latino organizations doing good work where there's not as many, especially for Black people, especially in Lane County. And this history that we're talking about is is older too, and it's neglected. So I just want to say that we need to learn about all these things, but there's a special place for the African identity, and there's been a special neglect of it that goes back hundreds of years, and that is disconnected from any land base. So this is our land base, and we need to be reconnected.
To answer specific like program expansion part of the question, there are definitely plans to expand the program in many different ways. One is definitely to explore different members of and groups within the BIPOC community. Another is to expand and see if other communities are interested in using this app and this sort of storytelling platform in their communities. And we actually already have interest from some other communities in Oregon. And even just like my sister-in-law called me the other day and said, what about Omaha? Can we do this in Omaha? Because she's in Nebraska. So you never know. And so there's definitely, there's route expansions which are planned. Then there's expansions into other additional group stories, and then there's geographical and other like app-based expansion. None of it's really the geographic, like exploring it in other communities has not really been explored yet. Marcy's probably getting nervous because I'm mentioning that right now. But we hope that is a possibility. We hope that we have created a platform that can be reused in other communities too.
So I have a question. Working on the Monuments Project, Malik and I have been looking up Black people in the region, and it turns out we're awash in amazing people. How did you, I'm very fond of Letitia Carson myself. I love that she got a land grant. But I want to know, how did you pick out, how you had a committee, right? How did you pick out these particular sites? What made these people rise to the top?
Well, I think, there is a long, and as you said, Mary, there's a lot of history out there. And so what we did is we kind of like got it all in front of the steering committee. And then first and foremost, what we had to think through was, okay, if we really want people to be able to physically walk or run, how do we, make it geographically possible? And then we just got feedback from the steering committee in order to make the decision. But really, it came down to storytelling and trying to tell the story of the Black experience. and thinking through which landmarks and pieces of history have really already exist within the community and that we just want to shed light on.
Yeah, I think that was, from what I understood, is that ongoing history from the 80s, 70s, 80s that had been captured and known about. And then it's only been like the only last 10 years that we've seen such as monuments, like you're saying, but these actual physical installations showing up. So now, so it was all the places that I understood that had physical in-place spaces that you could go to visit. Yeah.
Yep, correct.
Sandra, you had another question.
Is there any way for people that are not tech savvy, who do not or cannot afford a modern phone that can accept the app, is there any low tech way that they can get the maps or anything to do the routes? Or does that have to be done on a sophisticated phone?
Well, that is actually part of one of our next steps is possibly creating a paper map, a physical map that that people would be able to print off on their computers and then go and follow the map, or maybe even available in certain locations.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I said, if you came by the house tomorrow, the MEMS house, I could up it up and print up a map for you. And so we would be willing to do that. And then once you guys got that, we'd be happy to have a bunch of forms, maps at the MEMS house. People get them, go on their walks.
Perfect.
Have you disseminated directly to schools, whatever the grade level is, that they do local history, 4th, 5th?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe it was Anne actually from Peace Health who has had ongoing communication with all of the schools.
Because we were desperate. I mean, the reason I did it already with my grandson is we're all desperate to get outside and be safe, get a little exercise.
That's true. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
is the program available in Spanish?
It will be. It's actually in the process of being translated now, and we're hopeful that it will be available within the next few weeks to a month in Spanish.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too, because sometimes we overlook that relationship between the Black community and the Latinx community. And I think that it would be very much appreciated for both communities to be able to hear from one another, learn about one another. So I thank you for getting that Spanish version up and running.
All right, so you're going to do one more. If each of you got to pick one, so you're not competing for the same money or resources, but you got to pick one more loop, what's the next loop you would personally pick?
Well, do you know the sister in Lowell who has who had the land in Lowell?
Oh.
There's a Black couple who they own the land that the Lowell High School is sitting on. And when you go there, there's a placard there, and there's a picture of her on the school painted. It's a Black woman. She died in like 74. But I would make a marathon. Yeah, they go all the way out to Lowell and back.
Awesome.
That might be longer than a marathon.
Oh, really? Oh, is that far?
There and you could get a ride home.
Maybe if you like went over Pisgah or something.
Yeah.
What about
That's
you,
a
Becky?
great idea.
What would you do?
I would do the one that I'm actually currently working on putting together right now, which is the University of Oregon, specifically related to the athletics stories. So, for example, a lot of people don't know this, but the U of O had 2 Black players on the football team in the 1920s. They were one of the first college sports teams to have Black athletes. And so telling that story, I think, would be really interesting. And then just because I'm such a huge track fan, I'm really excited to tell and to figure out the best way to tell all of the wonderful stories of Hayward Field and many of the athletes like Otis Davis, who's currently on the new tower, and their stories.
And not to coattail Becky, but I would ride along with her because that's what I would love to see, the history there, because I had a daughter that graduated from the University of Oregon. She was a softball player and a pitcher. And you just really, just the dynamics of all of that just makes me excited, and I would love to see that. So I'm going to ride along with Becky on this one.
What about St. Mark's? Why St. Mark's? Why is St. Mark's on the list? Tell us a little bit about that story.
It is. It's in the West Eugene route. It's currently on the West Eugene route.
But why?
Yep.
It is the oldest African-American church in Eugene. And this July, it will be its 72nd anniversary. And I say this is because for the past year and a half, I've had the pleasure of pastoring that church. And it has been a historical commitment from the family. And, you know, the family, the Reynolds family, they still belong to that church. The three women, their three sisters, they still belong to that church where their parents were part of a group that built that church. And what you see is that church has come close to closing a lot of times, but it still has remained a mainstay in the community. And we would just love to show you around if you come down. If I'm there, we'd love to show you inside as well as outside. It's a great place to be.
So not counting that one, which is the favorite stop? You don't get to say St. Mark's. You like St. We already know that. Aside from that.
The favorite stop for me is the Coleman and the ATA area. I love that. And the reason I love it, and please, you guys, don't throw your shoes at me, but I live in that area and had never been to that part of where the mural is at and such. It's because we had been so isolated due to COVID and such and not getting out. But just something about that site is so peaceful, so calming. And that's a place where you can see children, family, older people, and that's just where my heart's at.
Yeah, I second that. I think that space does capture a lot of the spirit of the Black community during the 70s and 80s as well. Churchill and Jefferson Junior High was like a center point for many of the children growing up during that time, the grandchildren of our founders of the church. And I know that there's a lot of history there. So when you go there, you feel that history. And so having Dr. Coleman on there and recognizing the track for Miss Johnson, and being in that open space. I guess it used to be an airport, right? It used to be in the middle of town there. Now it's this big park. And so it's really great.
My favorite spot in one of our current routes is the Ferry Street community spot. I think for me, when I learned about that, which was after we started this project and I started doing research, I learned about the story of the Ferry Street community. And I was so moved because I've lived in Eugene for almost 11 years now. And being a runner and organizing the marathon and other events in Alton Baker Park, I never knew that was the history of that physical space. And so to go there now and know that that's what happened there is moving. It just is. And so it's not necessarily a positive story, but it's really good to know, like it's moving. And so that's why it would be my favorite.
And I want to just say that space you just spoke of, the fact that we have the Nobel Peace Prize circle in that same area is kind of that relationship between American Nobel Peace Prize winners and this space that used to be this discriminatory, exclusionary place. So anyway, I think that we have a lot of work to do and a lot of really poignant history that can really just spark our imaginations going forward. And I think this is a great opportunity. So thank you, Becky, and Peace Health for doing this in City Club. You guys, for hoping everybody gets to hear about this and join up.
And with that, we're out of time. Delisa, Mishantabi, Becky Radcliffe, Eric Richardson, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And we're all going to run out and jog the loops. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks.
This has been our March 5th, 2021 program, Strides for Social Justice. Before we proceed, I'd like to recognize our Diamond sponsors. Kaiser Permanente exists to provide high-quality, affordable healthcare services and to improve the health of our members and the communities we serve. More information at www.kp.org. Support comes from the University of Oregon. Since 1876, UO has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically. More information at uoregon.edu. Peace Health is proud to serve Eugene, Lane County, and beyond. As your hometown healthcare partner for more than 80 years, our mission is to keep you and your family healthy. Learn more at peacehealth.org. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. I would also like to acknowledge our gold sponsors: Jerry Diethelm, architect and landscape architect, AARP of Oregon, and Luvush Cobb. Before we thank our speakers today, I have a few quick announcements. Thank you to our in-kind sponsors: KRVM 91.9 Radio, Pack Info and Simplified Computing LLC, and Dotson's Photography. And a special thank you to public radio station KLCC FM 89.7 for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. Our programs are always available on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. If you are a City Club member, you can ask a question at a future taping of our programs. If you're not yet a member, you can join and then participate. More information is on our website, cityclubofeugene.org. Next week, our program focuses on attack on the U.S. Capitol, impact on the Republic and the Republican Party. More details and information about future programs can be found online at the City Club's website. Now, I would like to thank today's speakers for a great program: Delisa Meshintubi, Eric Richardson, Becky Radcliffe. Thank you for a great program. This concludes today's forum. Be well and stay safe.